All right. So I do want to thank you all for joining us tonight for our first session of our Top Soccer Workshop series. Tonight, we're going to discuss strategies when recruiting players and volunteers for your Top Soccer program. We have John Rainone and Caryn Goulet, and they'll also be going over common hurdles programs face and provide potential solutions for your program. I do want to point out we have the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So if you do have a question, feel free to use that or raise your hand throughout and we'll answer your question. Now I'm going to pass it on to Caryn.
Thank you, Jamie. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining on us this fine Thursday evening. Would love to make a couple quick introductions before we start screen sharing. And just to add on to what Jamie mentioned, that chat function, please keep it handy. There are a couple times this evening we're going to ask you to use that chat function in order to join us in conversation off to the side. So to start with a couple introductions, I'm going to start local and go national. So in addition to Jamie, who kicked us off this evening, there are several other members of the Mass Youth Soccer staff who are here and joining us. And I have to tell you, I'm extremely ecstatic, not only for these individuals in particular to be joining us in this effort for Top Soccer, but because they've really injected the whole Top Soccer opportunities in Massachusetts with lots of energy, enthusiasm during these past few months. So I want to ask, before John and I chat, for Tammy and Jacob, for the two of you to introduce yourselves real quickly and your roles at Mass Youth.
Hi, I'm Tammy Endo. I'm the manager of member services at Mass Youth. It encompasses a lot of different areas within the organization, but I'm really excited to be working with Caryn and John on Top Soccer. And if there's ever any questions, you feel free to reach out to me any time of day or through email.
Great.
Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Ames. I just started working with Mass Youth Soccer back in January, so I'm excited to be on board working with member services and Tammy as the admin, but also really just grateful to be on this committee with Caryn and John and get to help improve Top Soccer here in Massachusetts.
Jacob is a Top Soccer buddy from way back.
Way back.
That's right. So let's stay local. And John, do you want to do a quick intro of yourself?
Sure. John Rainone. I'm with the King Philip Soccer Association, and I've been helping with Tammy and Caryn and Jacob, trying to organize these next few weeks of topics, and really looking forward to moving this in a real strong positive direction.
Thank you. John's daughter Kelsey is on the line with us this evening, who's also a Top Soccer buddy from way back as well. So my name is Caryn Goulet, for those of you who have not met. I've been involved in Top Soccer for many, many years, and for a long time was kind of the main point of contact and the sole coordinator for the state. And so when I mentioned earlier that I'm ecstatic about the added support for this program at the Mass Youth Soccer level, it's because we now have Tammy and Jacob and John. All these years, Mass Youth has been an extremely strong supporter of Top Soccer, and now we've got so many more resources to add to it. We have a couple of special guests who are dialed in this evening that I want to introduce. First, from a regional standpoint, Pete, if you don't mind telling folks who you are, and then we'll end with Mr. Robinson.
Okay. My name is Pete Busser. I am the new East Region Top Soccer chair. I've been involved with Top Soccer for upwards of 30 years. I go back from originally out of Long Island in Eastern New York. And
but we won't hold that against him.
Started this with Ray Robinson when he was your state rep. So I've been around a long time, but retired to Delaware and kind of just got back into it at the national level again.
Thanks for joining us, Pete.
It's great to see. I'm getting to meet people now and see what great programs a lot of my states have.
We end the introductions with David Robinson, who's also on your screen, who is our national Top Soccer chair for US Youth Soccer. Dave, do you mind sharing a little bit with folks?
Sure. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dave Robinson. I'm currently located down in Florida, where I run a local TOPSoccer program, have for about 15 years. Because of the weather right now, we are in season. So we have 3 more weeks to go in our season, and then I'll be calling it quits and moving out to the Denver area come this summer. So I'm happy to be on, joining the event tonight, and I'm really pleased to see states like Mass Youth getting out in front of things, being proactive, offering this webinar series for your members. I think it's just fantastic and something that, hopefully we can see modeled elsewhere across the country. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. We're jealous because we had snow on the ground last week and we're still 2 weeks away from our season starting. So just change in geography. We're going to ask everybody as we now start to screen share and talk through tonight's topics in the chat. If you could please put your name, we can see your names for the most part on your screen identities, but also if you could include what town you're with, or if the program, the TOPSoccer program you're with is a collection of towns, kind of mention that. If you don't currently have a TOPSoccer program that you're associated with, if you could please just use your town, and also mention, are you restarting your program? In other words, is spring 2022 the first time coming out of COVID that you're restarting? Are you starting a new program, or have you been running kind of all along? So if you could kind of share that information with us in the chat. We'll start to share the screen now while you guys are including that info. So we thank you for joining this evening, and it's the first of a 3-part series. You've probably seen that there are separate registration requirements for each of them. Tonight's is our kickoff. It's a little lighter in content as a result. We're kind of getting into some really interesting nitty gritty during the next 2. And we really did that methodically because a lot of programs are just coming out of hibernation for many reasons. They couldn't really hold sessions for the past 2, perhaps 3, or maybe even 4 seasons. And so that's why we're starting tonight a little bit slow. These programs and sessions are for anybody who's a TOPSoccer coordinator, who wants to be a TOPSoccer coordinator, and even those programs who have been around forever and would like to share, because we certainly, that's probably, as David and Pete and John and others can attest to, that's the best way we grow, is through sharing. So for tonight, we just introduced you to a whole bunch of folks, and we'll have this contact info down below on one of the last slides as well. We want to share with you here in Massachusetts the shift to having so much wonderful support from the state office. If you have program questions, for many years it used to be kind of a ad hoc communication tool. And now there is a group email called tops@matthewsoccer.org, and that's routed primarily to Tammy. And Tammy, from the staff standpoint, is our main point of contact. You can take her info down here. We'll also have it in a slide later on, but we want to try to, and it'll become even more apparent during the next 2 weeks, why it's important to use Tammy as your funnel for communications and interactions. And it's not that John and I are going anywhere, but it's nice, and it will become a more centralized approach. So that said, tonight we're starting off talking about starting and restarting. And as the chat box is filling up, it's obvious that some have been dormant for a while, some programs, some have been ongoing. I also am part of a program in Wilmington, Mass, that's fairly large, but of course scaled way back during COVID. And so I'm sure we're all going to have some things to share later on in the session. We're going to ask you to use the chat again to talk a little bit about those things. But to start us off, we do want to start with something that may be new for some of you. It may be old. It's a 3.5-minute clip. This is also available on the US Soccer website. And if anyone can't hear that, please let me know.
Every time I leave TOPSoccer, I feel so happy because all the kids high-fiving, having a fabulous time, and it feels good to make that happen for lots of different people.
Hunter is 9 and in 3rd grade, Loves sports. Favorite TV shows, ESPN. Watching my son participate in top soccer makes me feel great.
I volunteer my time with Top Soccer because I personally get a lot out of it. I am able to share my experience and my love of soccer with athletes who might not otherwise be able to play a beautiful game like soccer. And it's really fun for me to see other buddies, volunteers, working with their athletes. The most important part of that is that they're all having fun. Like buddies, athletes, they're having so much fun together and they're building a relationship that lasts even outside of Top Soccer.
I was nervous to become a top soccer coach because I'm not an expert in soccer. I've watched a lot of soccer. Both my kids have played soccer for years and years. What the folks at Castle said, you don't need special skills for coaching top soccer. What you need is compassion, patience, a love of the game, and the ability to work and connect with different people. And so I thought I could do that, you know.
Soccer is a kind of sport and it's a kind of atmosphere that has no boundaries. You can go to a different country and be able to play soccer with people you can't even speak to, or like be able to understand or communicate. And sometimes these kids are not able to, or like we're not able to understand, they're not able to understand us in like the same level. And with soccer, you don't have that. It's like you're able to play, you're able to have fun, and you're all feeling the same feelings. It's like, it's something that includes everyone.
I think Top Soccer is a great way to see that you're not out there alone, because so many times we feel like we are as parents of a special needs kid. You hear about the numbers, but you're not around those people every day. You might be the only person in your neighborhood or one of the only people in your grade that has a special needs child. And being here, you see that, you know, there is a family, there is a community around this. And what you really see too is that there are kids that care about it, because right now, I mean, at least for me, I'm a parent of a younger child, and so you fear about for them in the future and how it's going to be when they grow up, and is there going to be bullying? And then you see these kids that are out here coaching or buddy systems for them, and you know that, you know, there's always going to be those kids out there that are going to be out there to have their back, that are going to be understanding. And so as a family, it just makes you feel comforted to know that that's the future that they have for them, that's awaiting them, and that there are other people that are in the same boat with you and they understand the circumstances you're in. And everyone's rooting for each other's kids out here.
Watching my son participate in top soccer and the joy that he has in being part of a team, having success, being competitive with like-minded athletes is very rewarding.
So not that too many of us needed a reminder of why we're here, but boy, that video is always a great way to start. The first thing you probably noticed is that the logo is a little bit different. It's gone through an overhaul, as has USU Soccer's logo. And so you're seeing, actually, if you look in, when we're not screen sharing, you can kind of see the new logo in our backgrounds as well. I'm going to stop sharing for a quick moment and thank all of you who entered into the chat what your town is and what the status is. Really great to see a couple of you that are starting new. So welcome, real welcome. It's helpful for that orientation for us. John's going to go into the next section here as an overview. Some of this will be applicable to new programs. I should say all of it will be applicable to new programs, some of it more applicable to restarted programs. So welcome, welcome, welcome. John, are you ready to start our next section?
Sure.
All righty, here we go.
Okay, just as the overview right there, I know a lot of you have existing programs, but I'm glad there's a lot of, there's some new people. So starting and restarting, we're going to go over field space and time, some ideas of field space, recruiting players, recruiting volunteers, buddies, and some hurdles that you might run into, and then also some revenue possibilities on how to raise some money to support the program that you're going to start. So first off, it is really important to have your local league and your board of directors from your local league be involved with this. So you kind of want to get in front of them, explain to them what TOPS is, maybe even go to the US Soccer website, print out some stuff from there, or even send them a link. So that way they have a little bit more knowledge of what it is. Find others to assist you. Establish a small committee. You don't need a whole bunch of people, but 4 or 5 people to start, 3 or 4 people to start, just somebody to help you out. Identify the need for a program still exists. I think that one is, I think there's a need everywhere for a program like this, especially after what we've been through the last couple of years. With the pandemic and everything, people are dying to get outside and just be part of something. And anybody that's already has a TOPS program already knows that once these kids come, they feel like they're part of a team, a real team. So you might want to reach out to some local people, local areas in your town, as far as finding if the program, can still exist. Contact state representatives or other directors of existing programs. Like Karen said, we have a slide that has my email address on it, my cell phone number. It's got Karen's number, Karen's email, and now Tammy and Jacob, which has been a tremendous help. So if you email that TOPS email, which I'm sure we can even put in the chat at some point, so that everybody has it again. But you send an email to there, and Tammy will get it out to us really quick. So we have a lot of ways to get connected with us. Reconnect with the families that were part of your program previously. So anybody that's already had a program. So the program that I'm running, I've been involved since 2010. And the last couple of years have been rough. The first year of the pandemic, we didn't have a program. The last year was really our first time back in the fall. And I typically had 40 to 45 kids. And last year for the fall, we had 27. So we definitely dropped off, but I'm seeing a lot of interest again. So definitely go back out. Even if you had to stop your program, even if you had to stop your program for 5 years, someone in your organization probably has family addresses, contacts they used before. So that's a really good place to start if you had a program previously. Field space. Field space, I'm sure everybody on this call knows that some of the field space is really tough to find. But work with your local league that's going to support your TOPS program. And then also go out into the community, because there are people that have venues that may have a location. You may not get the best time, but it might be Sunday afternoon, it might be Sunday night, early in the evening. But there's places out there, if you ask and you explain to them what type of program you have, there's people out there that are willing to help. The one big thing to keep in mind when you're looking for field space and time is that venue can handle athletes with disabilities. We have a few in our group that have wheelchairs, walkers, some have crutches and walking assistance. So you definitely want to make sure that they can kind of drive up to the field and get out and walk up to the field and not have to climb a bunch of stairs or really travel a large or far distance to the field if you can. And then there were a lot of restrictions. I know we had a lot of restrictions in our local area as far as field restrictions, parents being able to be there, where they could be, how far away they could be and all that stuff. So just make sure that you check not only your local area, but maybe you have to travel 5 to 10 miles. And maybe there's another community that's more than willing to say, this is something for us. King Philip Soccer handles, I have people coming as far as the Cape coming down to our field. I have people coming from 2 and 3 towns over. So don't think that you have to stick with just your local little area. Go beyond that. Players. So program needs players, right? So again, my part of it is reconnecting with the families that were part of your program, right? So that was one of the first things we talked about is if you had an existing program, reconnect with those families. Make a flyer. Contact your local schools, special education departments, administrators. I did that this year. I reached out to the special ed directors of 3 of the local schools in our area, the middle school and the elementary schools. I also reached out to the high schools because that's where I want the buddies from the high schools also. But a lot of those high school kids have siblings that are in elementary or middle school. And so you want to be able to reach all of them. So I made a flyer electronically. I put what our program is about. I put what times we meet. I put the days that we're going to meet because we're starting April 10th, but we're skipping the 17th. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew that we were not going to be there on Easter Sunday. We were going to skip that. And I've gotten a lot of positive response back from the schools, more quickly than I thought I was going to get. I sent the email out at 11 o'clock in the morning. By noontime, I had everybody responded to me saying they'd be more than happy to put this flyer up electronically, send it to all their teachers. So that's a really quick way to get the word out.
John, let me ask you this question. Would you be willing to share that flyer so that other programs, whether they're existing programs or starting new, would you be willing to share that with folks?
Sure.
Great. And Dave Robinson also put another recommendation in the chat, which is a good point, that pediatricians' offices,
Yes.
OT and PT therapy centers as well. Yeah, Sharon, it
probably-
sounds like you.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have forgot that since my wife works at a pediatrician's office. Yeah, I just saw parent advisory councils at schools is a really good spot to go.
We have one program in the state down in the Weymouth area where the 2 coordinators are physical therapists. One's a physical therapist, one is a special ed teacher. I'm not sure you could get a much better combination to, to run, not just their network, but their understanding.
Yeah. Volunteers and buddies are a real important part of our program. I was on a lot of the Zoom calls that Dave was running, and a lot of people from all over the United States talking about how hard it is to get volunteers. And it's true with a lot of organizations. Trying to get volunteers is tough. But we locally ourselves reach out to the high school, and we have phenomenal response from the high school. We get great response from them. I'm up to right now, my email list for volunteers is 127. Last year, we were a little bit low on numbers. We had probably 30 or 35 buddies consistently every week. But high schools are huge. Local colleges, a lot of high schools use it as their volunteer work. It's part of their curriculum for the high schools. So definitely get involved with that. And they don't have to, one thing that people forget and people get scared about, and it was in that video too, people get scared because they don't know anything about soccer and they don't want to come out. And that's a real important thing to stress with everyone, is that you don't have to be an expert in soccer. You just have to communicate and want to be with the kids out in the field. And you want to be able to give them every chance they can to be part of the team. And that's what we're about. That's what the volunteers are about. And at the very beginning of that video, it said that, you know, you get involved in TOPSoccer and you can't wait to get back there the next week. I don't think I had any volunteer ever come up to me and say, after the first week, say that, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I would never want to be back here again. It's usually the opposite. It's usually they can't wait for the next week to come back.
Right.
And that's good. That's a good feeling to have.
John, can we interrupt here and stop screen sharing and ask Sharon and Ken?
Yeah.
You both just have entered a couple of interesting comments in the chat about two things. One, Sharon, your program actually hires and pays, sounds like, for aid. Can you talk a little bit more about that for us?
Sure. So we felt comfortable coaching soccer. We were not comfortable in the way to guide special needs children. So we also have buddies. We have soccer teams that sign up, and our buddies outnumber our special kickers. So we are very lucky in that way. But we also pull in teacher aides, which helps us with a couple of things. So it helps us manage special needs families and the children on the field. Some have some very unique needs that we're not trained to handle. And it also helps us with networking. So they've also recruited families through word of mouth to participate in our program. And yes, they are paid.
They are paid. Do you find that it was necessary or helpful to pay them?
Necessary to keep them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you also charge for participation in your program, or is it
We
subsidized?
do. We charge a very minimal fee. And our players get both a t-shirt and a soccer ball, and that pays for the teacher aides participation. We utilize an indoor facility, and that facility donates the time every single time we go back and ask for it. So
Nice.
lucky in that way, we do not have to pay for a facility.
Nice. And you've been doing this for a long time, Sharon.
We're in our 8th or 9th year.
Great. Ken, do you want to expand a little bit on your comment about ABA programs?
Yes, so we were very fortunate that we had, I have a connection, I'm a teacher in our school in Wellesley. To us in Needham, and one of the directors there was interested. I invited her to come to my program and look at it, and she's like, oh my gosh, half of my kids are here, and she had no idea. So she is now part of my program, and she volunteers every week and refers all of her children that are in our program to come to mine, as well as spreading the wealth to other local ABA programs and in the Metro West area. So as I think I heard somebody else say, you know, not just your town, spread the wealth to everyone else, all the other towns. So we get a lot of kids from other towns as well. But it's a huge advantage for me to have her specialty. And she also will sometimes bring some other staff members just to volunteer to help out. And the parents, I think, really appreciate it because they know that she's recommending them to get outside services from a program that we run, as well as she's there as a specialist in helping my staff, training my students. We do like a student training. So she'll stay and train with them for a couple days so they understand all the challenges that we might have with our athletes. And it's been a tremendous addition, and I wouldn't know what to do without her sometimes.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
This is a good time to pause and share with particularly like Travis, Paul, and Rob, whom have indicated that you're, and I know a couple of you are a little further down the path than others to start a new program. There's probably no two TOPSoccer programs that are alike. They are like snowflakes. And the reason that very few TOPSoccer programs are exactly alike is because very few communities or audiences of TOPSoccer players are alike, nor are the pool of resources or field space or pool of volunteers alike. And so one of the great strengths of a TOPSoccer program is its ability to adapt to what resources and volunteers and space they do have. But the best part about this kind of community of folks is the sharing. And earlier we talked about, or John talked about, volunteers being, and Dave and Pete are extremely familiar with this challenge that's been voiced, you know, tenfold by attendees at other events. We're going to have a collaborative session, the third of these 3 sessions. We're going to take tonight to gather a couple things that will be the focal points of that third session. Volunteers will certainly be one of them, and we're already starting to hear some ideas about how to gather volunteers. Do we want to stop here and ask if there are other kind of questions that are coming to mind before we proceed back on with the presentation? Things that comments and suggestions as you're listening? And if not, we'll go ahead and proceed. Travis, you look like you're soaking it all in. Okay. So John, do you want to continue on with this one, or do you want me to take this one?
Sure.
Good.
So Carrie and I were talking, and we listed some potential hurdles, right? So you want to establish a budget. It sounds like, you know, where if you're hiring someone and everything, you definitely want to establish that budget. Uniforms, you know, I like to use local people in my area because if it's somebody local, I can explain to them what the uniforms are for, and a lot of times you can work out a pretty good deal with that. Equipment, soccer balls, cones, first aid kits, all that stuff. Don't be afraid to go out and reach out to local sporting good places around, because we did, and we wound up getting 2 dozen size 4 balls and 2 dozen size 5 balls for nothing. They just gave them to us. So don't be afraid to ask. Different facilities, right? Some people have to pay. We have to pay. We have to pay when we're outside. It's a school field, and actually the fees went up even more now because of COVID the last couple of years. They're assessing different types of fees, so you have to keep that in mind. And like we've been saying, a real big hurdle for a lot of people is getting the volunteers. So trying to establish a good spot to get your volunteers is a key piece of this. And then you guys actually mentioned the bullet point of other. So there's other things out there that you don't even know. Sometimes you don't even know those other things until you stop. And when that happens, just make sure that you keep those emails in mind and email. Give us a call, let us know.
Right.
And we probably ran into it, or one of the other people that are on this call probably have already gone through it.
So we have some exciting new developments coming in Massachusetts on a couple of the topics John just mentioned, one of which is kits or uniforms, a registration system. That's another that we'll be talking about. Equipment is yet another opportunity we're going to be talking about. Most of those we're going to be talking about in the next session, which is next Thursday. But what we'd love to do is take, say, 2 minutes here. And again, feel free to use the chat or unmute. we've only listed a few of the hurdles. What other, and Sharon's already started, what other hurdles or barriers to success or kind of getting off the dime are you either finding or anticipating? These are going to form the basis for the third of these 3 workshop sessions for us to have working groups and collaborate so that you leave after 3 weeks with answers to your concerns and your questions. So feel free to throw in the chat. I see Sharon's mentioned something which is always a big hit, and that's going to be the last component of the 3rd session, which is other ideas, things that make it special, things that you've used to differentiate your program. What we're hoping to do through these 3 series is eliminate for you as many of the concerns and the hurdles to success so that your program starts this spring, or if it's in the fall, Yep, good. So we're going to, that's a great question, Travis. So the question is interfacing with the families around their level of involvement. So let me tangent real quickly and describe 2 scenarios that may be relevant here. So in the program that I run, that I have locally, we've got a pretty, an individual player who's nonverbal and has quite a few triggers, including if anyone's invading his space too much, if anyone's too loud, and his parents are extremely proficient in being able to predict those triggers, and have volunteered on many of occasions to be his buddy on the field. We try as much as possible to give parents that 1-hour break and to allow them to watch their children be successful, have fun, smile. And so it's with great concern that I say to the parent, you know, we would really love to give you a break. We'd really love to be able to afford you the opportunity to just be an observer. However, you know, if maybe you'd allow us to transition and watch you and work with you as you mentioned, as you are buddy with your child, that's one way to do it. There's another example where, and it happens to be the case, there's an awful lot of broken families that we see in our program, at the local program. And so the top session is the time of the week where both parents arrive and are on the sideline together, and it adds an element and a dynamic to the players' experience that day because they've got a large amount of distraction going on with their both parents in one place. And so interacting with the families at that level becomes a bit of a challenge. Would definitely recommend that that be a coordinator's conversation to have and not an individual buddy's conversation to have. So tonight was not meant to tackle all these, it's meant to list all these, but you know, I couldn't help myself, so I apologize. Great comments in the chat, peer mentoring programs. One thing, and maybe it's there and I skipped it, is probably retention of your volunteers, and maybe it's there and I missed it in the chat. That's usually a hurdle because high schools players get to a certain age where the decision is, do I get a job on a Saturday or a Sunday, whichever day TOPS is typically held in your town, that pays, or do I attend TOPS session, which tends to be right in the middle of the shift. Or retention can also come in the flavor of the player, a volunteer may have their own sports schedule of games, so they can't be there all the time. Wonderful. Feel free to continue to use the chat for listing hurdles. And I would recommend, just like Sharon has done, because she's got a real great program going up there on the North Shore, if you'd want to also add nuggets of wisdom and nuggets of suggestions that will be helpful, we will be using all of these, particularly in the third session. So John, you want to close out this section before we?
Sure.
Okay.
That was a great day.
That was, you want to tell everybody what that day, what the picture is from?
That's from a couple of years ago at Gillette Stadium. Actually, the player that's in that picture is one of our players from King Philip, from our area. Her and her sister were in the program. Hopefully they're coming back after COVID. But this was a top soccer day at the Revs, where we got to be on the field, and then got to go up into the suite at the end. The kids absolutely loved it. They got to play on the same field that the Revs played on, which was great. And we'll talk about that in a little bit later, one of our other weeks coming up. But revenue possibilities, obviously registration fee. Know what your costs are. At King Philip, we do charge a registration fee. It's very modest fee. It's just enough to cover a uniform shirt. We give everybody a uniform, everybody a ball. At the end of the year, we do give out medals, and we usually have sandwiches or pizza or whatever for all the volunteers, all the buddies at the end, and we usually get cupcakes for all the kids. Sponsorships is a great way to get some quick money for your local thing, and that sponsorship might be just someone volunteering the uniform shirts, or maybe you can get them to donate some balls. And grants, which we were part of. That was one of the Zoom meetings with, I believe, with Dave, and he explained how to get grants for TOPSoccer and everything. So you want to be involved in some of those Zoom meetings. They have some good information in there, and then there's some good follow-up to it afterwards. And then just flat out donations from different people. I have a couple of parents that, like I said, we charge a very modest fee for what the kids wind up getting out of it. But we have some parents that just flat out just write us a check for double what we asked for. And that's been consistent over the last at least 5 years with some of the parents. We had one parent last year. My daughter helps me, and we left the field, and she kept paying me every week. And I finally realized it after the third week, and I'm like, you're not supposed to pay every week. She said, oh my God, it was such a little price. I just figured it was every week. I didn't think it was for the whole 6 weeks. I said, no, here's your money back. It's for all 6 weeks. So, but those are the kind of people you're dealing with when you're dealing with TOPS parents. They understand what's going on, and they understand and they appreciate what's happening for their kids. So.
For sure, the level of appreciation. I'll tell you, if you also dabble in the youth soccer or adult soccer world, in addition to your TOPSoccer responsibilities, the breath of fresh air is you'll never have a player yelling at a ref, a parent yelling at a volunteer. There'll be no emails about playing time. They're the most grateful individuals that you could ever hope to work with. So it certainly makes it worthwhile. Let's just take a real quick pause here, because there are a couple of important questions in the chat about age. And I want to make one distinction. Thank you, Dave, for noting about the lack of a limit. Massachusetts also doesn't necessarily have a limit. There's a bit of a but here, though. And I'll just again go back tangent to a personal situation. We had a fellow who, at this point, he was 22 years old, and probably functionally was around 5 years old. At 22, his body size had grown significantly larger than his 5-year-old disposition could account for. He was drawn to very young kids extremely loving and sharing and gracious, but really didn't have a self-awareness around his body size. And so we, as program coordinators, tried as often as possible to try to keep him in a group of other players that were at least close enough in size. But there did get to be a point where we needed to have a conversation with the parents about what was more appropriate. And so, although we would never ever wish to turn away a player, that's the one and only time that we had to kind of draw the line at that point, because he became older and older and didn't have the self-awareness to be able to be in the vicinity of the younger players. It's not going to happen all that often, but if there's ever a reason for there to be a limit, it's probably as the body grows with the age. Travis, did you want to participate here?
I had a question related to older age participants as well that I seem relevant to raise. I gather that players who are 18 and older now have to also complete safe sport training. How is that handled if a player in TOPSoccer who's 18 or older may be limited in a way that prevents them from engaging meaningfully with that type of training? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, so fantastic question. So we could go one or two ways with this. Next week, next Thursday, we have an entire session devoted to what's new and rolling out, which is a centralized registration database that's also going to have a risk management element to it. Tammy, do you want to kind of in a overview sense talk a little bit about Travis's question about 8 players who are age 18 plus?
Actually, it is something that we're going to cover next week, but there is a waiver for that safe sport requirement. And Mary is going to go over all of that, and she's the expert. So I'd feel more comfortable, Travis. If you're not going to be able to make it next week, I can put you in touch with Mary directly. And she can answer that completely. But there is a waiver for TOPSoccer players, so they don't have to do the safe sport.
Great, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, and I'll be here next week.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great,
it's gonna
thank
be
you. But and Mary will elaborate completely on that as well.
Yeah, just a quick sneak peek, and Tammy was going to probably end the session about this, but while you're talking, Tammy, do you want to give folks a kind of the soundbite for what to expect out of next week and the new and fantastic things that are coming down the pike for TOPSoccer?
Sure. Next week is more of an administrative type of session. We're going to cover what we need to do for registration going forward, as well as all the risk management stuff, whether it be for your buddies, players that are older than 18, and your coaches. In addition to that, we're going to discuss some great new partners that we have, a uniform program that we're going to introduce, as well as some discounts. And we're also going to talk about the day at the Revs that we have planned in October. So that's just a kind of a quick nutshell, but we'll go into everything more in depth next week.
Yeah, I would say one of the most exciting changes for this year, in my personal opinion, is the centralized registration database. At the moment, again, every TOPSoccer program is like a snowflake. Some exist under the auspices of their town league program or their town recreational program, and there are 18 disparate different registration systems out there or more. And so getting the town-based registrars to send in those registrations for TOPSoccer players, which there is no charge for. Massachusetts Youth Soccer subsidizes all those charges. US Youth Soccer subsidizes their portion of those charges as well. But there seems to be a disconnect getting town-based registrars to send all that data in. So we're real happy to roll out a centralized registration database system. At the very end of the day, we hope to make sure that there's liability coverage for all TOPSoccer players. And so this is a real surefire way to do that. And Dave made mention, Mike Borslow, who's on this evening, I'm not sure you're going to be able to see him via video, but for Massachusetts, but really for US Youth Soccer nationwide, Mike Borslow is part of he's a chair of the risk management committee for US Youth Soccer and has been a key contributor and reason why we're as far down the path as we are. Great. So we're nearing the end. We're going to share in order to provide everybody again the contact information. And then I don't know if Pete or Dave, you're noticing here the information about the virtual coaching courses coming up. Would either of you like to comment quickly on those?
I cannot, sorry.
And no worries, no worries. So I'll take this just as an FYI. So again, we talked about the TOPSoccer community being a very benevolent one. There's a lot of state organizations who there's cross-functional sharing. So there are 2 state organizations that are holding virtual coaching courses. And you might say to yourself, well, what is this? Tonight is not a coaching course, of course, right? If you were to be part of the grassroots coaching licenses, there would be something more structured and specific. Well, believe it or not, there's also a coaching course for TOPSoccer. That typically and almost always has been delivered in person, but of course, change calls for change. And so now we're having the opportunity to do so virtually. So you'll have the ability, and what we'll do is take these links and put them in the chat as well. So if you would like to pre-register for them, you can do so. One of them is from 1 to 4 on Sunday, virtual, of course. The other one is 5 to 7 p.m. on Sunday. That one's not a link registration. That one requires sending an email message to the coordinator. We also included, again, and of course, this will be available in a recording, all of our contact information up top. This is just the beginning, and we're just scratching the surface. There are a ton of resources on the USYS website, and we at the local level here also are at your disposal. And again, we really just touched the surface tonight. When John mentioned earlier the event at the New England Revolution or Gillette Stadium, the same field where the New England Patriots play, this picture here is the group photo from that event from 2 years ago. We also will be talking about in the next couple of weeks the upcoming events, one of which is a repeat of this. Plans are underway, the date, the time, the Revs opponent has been identified. Tammy and Jacob have been working hard. Have been working hard with our New England Revolution partner. Last year, because we couldn't do this, instead we partnered with the Revs for a virtual 5K, which ended up being a real nice event. It did raise some money, and so that money is available for any of the programs across the state in order to funnel through Tammy their requests for needs. And so we're really looking forward to having an event like this, like you're seeing in the picture yet again this year, with great turnout for both players and buddies. And I'll tell you, one of the kind of piece de resistance of this event is, as John mentioned earlier, the New England Revolution donated to us not just the field activities, but some of their largest suites. And we went up into those suites, players and families, and we were able to watch the New England Revolution game from those suites. They also fed us. It's just a fantastic partnership we have with the New England Revolution. And so we thank all of you. Preliminarily, I have to say, for those of you who have existing TOPSoccer programs, again, if you're restarting your program, we hope it's with as many players and volunteers as you had once before it ran. If you've been running your program all along, you've got a whole lot better momentum than others. A lot of programs across the state had to pause. And if you're starting a program from scratch, I can't think of a better time to start a program here in Massachusetts. I can't wait till next Thursday, where you all can see the kits that are going to be available, the uniforms that are going to be available, and lots of other information. So before we close, oh, isn't that funny, Dave? I'm reading your comment that the winner of the 5K was a friend of yours. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Well, as long as he was a Pats fan and a Revs fan and not a, New York Giants fan or something.
no.
Sorry, Pete, no offense.
Loyal Patriots, Tom Brady. They named their dog Brady.
There we go. Any parting questions or comments before we close this evening in anticipation of next week?
Travis has a great question that hopefully we'll get to next week, and one that I know it's on the top of mind of many people.
Yeah, good stuff. We'll probably do that in session 3, Travis, just so you know. Good questions. Wonderful. Pete and Dave, we thank you for joining us this evening and hope if you have the time, you're able to join us for the next 2 Thursdays. There's lots more to share. Again, this was kind of scratching the surface. We get a whole lot deeper in the next 2 weeks. Jamie, thank you for your coordination and hosting capabilities. And of course, thank you to Tammy and Jacob and John. And you didn't happen to see Mike Borislow on video tonight, but behind all of that is Mike Borislow, our executive director here at Mass Youth. Hope you all have
Thank
a
you,
fantastic
Karen.
evening. All right. Thank you all. Have a fantastic night.
Thank you.
Good night.
See you all next week.
Sounds great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Great job.